In January of 1980, Steve McQueen got married in secret. Weeks earlier, a doctor had told him the cancer in his chest would kill him and that nothing could be done about it. He proposed anyway, and Barbara Minty said yes, knowing exactly what she was agreeing to. 10 months later, she buried him. Before Barbara came MacGraw, who gave up the biggest career in Hollywood to be with him and walked out 5 years later. Before Ali came 16 years and 2 children with Neile, who was still defending him 30 years after they put him in the ground. The 2 children were Terry and Chad. Both of them chased the same dangerous things their father chased, and both died young. These are the 5 people Steve McQueen loved the most. Number 5, MacGraw. In 1970, MacGraw was the most famous woman in America.
My career took off at the hands of the press. It was, this is the new girl. And I'm looking around the room to wonder who they're talking about.
Love Story had just come out and turned her into the biggest female draw in Hollywood. Her husband was Robert Evans, the head of production at Paramount and one of the most powerful men in the business. Between the career and the marriage, she had leverage almost no actress of that era ever got hold of. Then Paramount put her in a film called The Getaway, and her co-star was Steve McQueen.
But Steve McQueen, who was, of course, a giant movie star, wanted the girl in the blockbuster hit. That was me. That was the whole thing that...
It was directed by Sam Peckinpah, and the shoot took them out to Texas, far from Los Angeles and far from anyone watching. Ali was married to the man running the studio that made the movie. Steve was 16 years into a marriage with 2 children in it. Neither of those facts survived the production. What happened between them on that shoot became one of the most public affairs of the decade, and Ali has never dressed it up.
And at what point in the film did you and Steve sort of decide, well, I like you, or we're together, we're feeling...
Right away.
She has said plainly that she left her marriage for him, and she has been just as clear about what he did to her room. The way she tells it, he was the kind of man who walked in and made everyone stop and ask what that was, and she was no exception. Robert Evans found out. He had greenlit the picture, cast his own wife in it, and watched the whole thing come back to him. The marriage was finished by June of 1973. And 5 weeks after the divorce came through, Ali married Steve McQueen in Cheyenne, Wyoming. 2 marriages ended so that one could start. And then the woman who had just been the biggest star in the country stopped working. Ali gave up her career for him.
You gave up huge chunks of yourself and your life for men.
The give up probably was when I married Steve McQueen, when indeed I did give up my career.
She has said so directly, stepping back from the roles, the offers, and all the momentum Love Story had built to become a wife on a ranch. Whether McQueen asked for that or simply accepted it depends on who was telling the story, though his first wife had a harder read on it. Neile said flatly that Steve set out to destroy Ali's career because he was jealous of her success. The marriage lasted 5 years and came apart under the weight of his drinking, his affairs, and a competitiveness he could not switch off. They separated in 1977 and divorced in August of 1978.
It angered me, and I felt unappreciated, and I felt that half of me wasn't being celebrated.
What she has said about it since is the part that lasts. Looking back, decades later, Ali refused to play the victim. There were wonderful days and dreadful days, she said, and she has never pretended otherwise. But she also said something that carries more grief than any accusation would have. I wish we had both grown old, sober. She never remarried and outlived him by 43 years. And when reporters asked her about Steve McQueen for the rest of her life, she talked about him the way you talk about something that genuinely happened to you, rather than something you regret. The 2 people who cost him the most were his children, and neither of them made it out. Number 4, Terry McQueen. Terrence Leslie McQueen was born in the summer of 1959. 18 months before her brother, and she arrived into the middle of her father's rise.
It was very important to him that my brother and I had a real sense of home. We were able to go to him and talk to him, not just as a father, but as a friend.
By the time she was old enough to remember anything, Steve McQueen was becoming the most famous man in the country. Wanted Dead or Alive had made him a television star. The Magnificent Seven and The Great Escape turned him into a movie star. Terry grew up inside that machine, and by every account that has ever surfaced, she was one of the few things in his life that stayed simple. Neile spent 50 years putting the worst of that marriage on the record. On one point, she has been immovable on one point, and she has repeated it in interview after interview for 40 years. Whatever else he did, he never touched the children. Even at his worst, she said, he always stopped short of harming them. He was loving and affectionate with them, and that never changed.
The one thing that was extraordinary and the attitude that never changed was towards our children. He really was wonderful with them.
For a man who broke almost everything else he built, that line holds.
He took her to work with him. Photographs from film sets through the 60s show a small girl standing beside a father in costume. At 13, she appeared briefly on screen with him in The Getaway, which means the only footage of the two of them together in a movie comes from the picture that ended her parents' marriage.
It was, the divorce was hard because, you know, it's been almost 16 years.
That's always tough.
And it's like a death in the family.
She was 12 when her parents divorced, and 21 when her father died. Terry stayed out of the spotlight for the rest of her life, which, in that family, took genuine effort. Producing suited her better than performing, and she eventually ran a film production company out of Malibu called Redline. Her daughter was named Molly. Then, in March of 1998, Terry McQueen died of respiratory failure. She was 38 years old. Her father had been killed by a cancer in his lungs at 50.
He died this morning in another Mexican clinic. His heart stopped beating after doctors removed one of the tumors. McQueen was just 50.
His daughter's lungs gave out on her at 38. Neile raised Molly herself. 2 of Steve McQueen's children were alive when he died. The second one spent the next 44 years trying to become him. Number 3, Chad McQueen. Chadwick Stephen McQueen was born on December 28, 1960, and he was 19 years old when his father died.
When my dad passed, just all of a sudden he was gone, and I had to grow up very fast, and I was getting hit with a lot of stuff, a lot of decisions.
What he did with the next 44 years is the closest thing this story has to an answer about what Steve McQueen actually passed on. Chad went into acting first. In 1984, he played Dutch, one of the Cobra Kai bullies in The Karate Kid, which put him in one of the biggest films of the decade at 23. Then he stopped. Years later, he told the Associated Press that he had decided to give racing a total commitment, and that was the end of the acting career. Racing was his father's real religion. Steve had competed on motorcycles and in cars for most of his adult life, sometimes under a fake name to get around studio contracts that forbade it. There were races at Sebring. There was an entire film, Le Mans, made essentially so he could go racing on somebody else's money. Chad followed him into all of it.
But yeah, my dad, I started riding motorcycles when I was 6 years old. Started racing at 9. And I won my class in the World Made a Grand Prix. So there I went into go-karts and later into cars. And
he raced professionally, competed at Daytona and Le Mans, took the injuries that come with it, and eventually founded McQueen Racing with his own children. The documentaries came later. He produced I Am Steve McQueen in 2014 and Steve McQueen, The Man and Le Mans in 2015. 2 films built specifically to explain his father to people who only knew the poster.
I think the reasons your viewers will like it is there's so many layers to what happened during the making of the picture, and it really shows what my dad was all about as far as not really giving a shit what anybody said, including studio heads. So,
a man who could have spent his life resenting a famous parent, instead spent it curating him. What Chad admired had nothing to do with the movie stardom, and he was open about it. Talking to Film Inc., Chad described his father in terms of honesty and integrity, and said the thing about him was that you could count on him. That is a strange sentence to hear about a man who cheated on 2 wives and disappeared into drugs for years. But it was true of the father Chad got. When Chad had a son of his own, he named him Chase, after a horse Steve had loved. On September 11th, 2024, Chad McQueen died at 63.
The actor best known for his role in Karate Kid, Chad McQueen, has died.
His family put out a statement, and the line that mattered was about legacy. His passion for racing, they said, had served as a way to honor his father's legacy, and he had passed that passion and knowledge and dedication down to them, and they would carry on not only his legacy, but their grandfather's as well. 3 generations, 1 obsession, running in a straight line from a reform school kid who had nothing. Both of Steve McQueen's children are gone now. The woman who raised them outlived them both. Number 2, Neile Adams. When they met in 1956, Neile Adams was the one with the career.
I was coming out of rehearsal, and I ran down the stairs from Carnegie Hall, and there he was, and we bumped into each other, and he looked at me and said, "You're pretty."
A Broadway dancer who had been on the cover of Life magazine, she was working steadily. Steve McQueen was an unknown, a Marine Corps veteran and reform school graduate, scraping around New York for acting work with nothing behind him. Between them, she had the money, the credits, and the reputation. All he had was a motorcycle. That motorcycle is where she says it started. Neile had never been on one in her life. He told her to get on and hold on tight, and by her account, that was the beginning of the whole thing. They married on September 21st, 1956, less than a year after they met. Terry arrived in 1959. Chad came at the end of 1960. Within 4 years of the wedding, Steve McQueen went from an unknown to the star of a hit television series, and by the mid-60s, he was the biggest box office draw on the planet. Neile stopped working to raise the children while it happened. The marriage lasted 16 years, and it was not a peaceful one.
What was it like for you during that period, being married to...
It was a horror.
There were other women, and she knew about them. Drugs came in, and a temper that got worse as the fame got bigger. In the decades since, she has been unusually blunt about all of it, including a wry line about how he always brought her presents when he had been running around with somebody else. But she fought for that marriage.
No, we tried. And, it was one of those times in one's marriage that everything falls apart.
In 1964, when Natalie Wood set her sights on Steve during a film shoot, Neile intercepted the whole thing and made sure Wood never got a private moment with him. Her comment on it, offered years later with no apology at all, was that if Natalie Wood had known her better, she might have thought twice before going after her husband so openly. The divorce filing came in October of 1971. It was finalized the following year.
The divorce was hard because I was married to almost 16 years.
That's always tough.
And it's like a death in the family. It was always hard.
The settlement came to roughly $1.1 million, and she has said she could have taken more and chose not to. Then something happened that almost never happens. 6 years after he died, the public version of Steve McQueen was still the poster. The sunglasses, the motorcycle, the king of cool. Nobody who had lived with the man had said a word about what that was actually like. Then his first wife wrote it down.
Neile was married to Steve McQueen, and she has actually written a book, My Husband, My Friend, which is about her life and the story with Steve. And it is now the 20th anniversary of the book. Hopefully it hasn't been sold yet in Germany, but you're going to get a chance.
My Husband, My Friend came out in 1986, told by the person who had been standing next to all of it for 16 years, and it put the whole man on the page. The parts that were unforgivable sat right next to the parts she still loved. The Associated Press ran it. The Washington Post ran it. 40 years later, she has never taken any of it back. Then interview after interview, decade after decade, and she never once let anybody flatten him into either a saint or a monster.
The fact is, he was a fabulous guy. He was great. He had a dark side to him, but he had big ambitions.
And she has been completely immovable on one claim, repeated for 40 years. The most intense relationship he ever had, she says, was with her. In her telling, she was the one pivotal person in his life, and he revered her and trusted her and loved her. When Terry died in 1998, Neile raised her granddaughter Molly. When Chad died in 2024, she was still alive to bury her second child. Asked once what Steve McQueen left behind, her answer put herself at the end of the list on purpose. Their children, she said, their grandchildren, his films, and her. There was one more, and she got him for the shortest time of anyone. Number 1. Barbara Minty. Barbara Minty met Steve McQueen in 1977 on a photo shoot.
I was told that I was going to, my agent called me, I was in Idaho, and I was told I was going to meet Steve McQueen for a part in a movie. I don't act, so it was a little suspicious. She said, come down and do it anyway, you'll have fun in Los Angeles.
A fashion model in her 20s, she was working out of New York. By then, he was 47, coming off the wreckage of 2 marriages, drinking heavily, out of the movie business by choice, and living on a ranch in Santa Paula, California. She moved into that ranch, and the Manhattan modeling career stopped. For 2 years, they lived a life that almost nobody photographed, which for Steve McQueen was the point. Then, in December of 1979, doctors told him he had mesothelioma, a cancer of the lung lining caused by asbestos, and that it was terminal.
When he got caught and brought back, they put him in the brig and they made him scrape the inside of a ship or a submarine or something. So he was doing that for a while and the asbestos was flying. So that's what they think they got it, where he got the asbestos.
He married her on January 16, 1980. The diagnosis was already in. She knew it. There was no career benefit in it for her, no money worth having, nothing to gain except the certainty of watching him go. Saying yes meant taking on a man with months left. What she did with those months is the part people forget. Barbara went with him through every treatment, including the clinics in Mexico when American doctors had run out of options. Watching him fade before anyone had a name for it, she later said he was not the same Steve she had known, that he was kind of running down. On November 7, 1980, in Juarez, surgeons removed roughly 5 pounds of tumors from his body. For a few hours afterwards, it looked like it had worked. A doctor's wife who was there said he seemed improved, that he was even talking, that he was in good spirits. At 3:45 the next morning, Steve McQueen's heart stopped.
He died this morning in another Mexican clinic. His heart stopped beating after doctors removed one of the tumors. McQueen was just 50.
He was 50 years old, and Barbara had been his wife for 10 months. She could have disappeared after that. Instead, she built the rest of her life around him. There was a book of the photographs she had taken during their years together. In 2012, she stood in front of the United States Congress and testified about asbestos. And what she said there is the closest thing in this entire story to a verdict on what she lost. Asbestos, she told them, robbed her of her life and her future with Steve, and took away an icon beloved by millions.
It's the worst experience until it touches you, then you'll really want to get out there and do something about this. Asbestos is horrible. It's brought a big, huge man down to his knees. It's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
She had been his wife for 10 months, and she counted the loss in decades. Steve McQueen was left by his father before his first birthday and signed away by his mother at 14. He spent the next 36 years building families and watching them come apart, most of the time by his own hand. At the very end, sick and out of chances, he found somebody who chose him with full knowledge of what choosing him meant, and she stayed.
She got the least time of anyone on this list, and she gave everything she had anyway. That is why she is number 1. Steve McQueen never gave a speech about who he loved. What he gave was the last year of his life, and everything in it pointed the same direction. He married a woman who stood to gain nothing. He kept the children he had hurt nobody else with. And the people who outlived him spent the next 40 years saying it out loud on his behalf. Neile put 16 years on the record and never softened a line of it. Chad made 2 films about his father and named his own son after a horse Steve had loved. Barbara stood in front of Congress and called it her life and her future. Ali got the danger. Neile got the 16 years and the damage. Terry and Chad got the one part of him that never broke. Barbara got the dying man and stayed anyway. He was left by a father he never met and given away by a mother who could not handle him, and he spent the rest of his life trying to build the thing he was never given. He was bad at it, and he kept doing it anyway, right up to a wedding in January of 1980 that he already knew he would not survive. 10 months later, he was gone, and the 5 of them were what he left behind. So which one surprised you the most? The wife who defended him for half a century? The movie star who gave up her career? Or the woman who married him knowing exactly how it ended? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories about the people behind the legends you grew up watching, subscribe. There is a new one every week.